Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, September 14th. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Kim Mo-gen. Before we begin, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. South Korea's chief nuclear negotiator, Yoido, who is in Tokyo, is meeting with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, Sung Kim and Takehiro Funakoshi. They're likely to discuss issues on the Korean peninsula, especially following North Korea's recent missile launch. South Korea reports nearly 1,500 new COVID-19 infections Tuesday, with the weekend effect still in play. Local governments, however, have their guard up in case infections peak over the upcoming Chuseok holidays. And the international community has pledged to donate over $1 billion to Afghanistan as it faces a major humanitarian crisis after the Taliban took over the country last month. Our top story this morning, South Korea's chief nuclear negotiator, Yoido, is holding talks in Tokyo this morning with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts Sung Kim and Takehiro Funakoshi. They're likely to discuss ways to manage the Korean peninsula in a stable manner following North Korea's recent test firing of cruise missiles. There has also been speculation the North may have restarted its main nuclear reactor. The envoys are also set to discuss providing the North with humanitarian aid in a bid to bring the regime back to the negotiating table. No will meet with Sung Kim separately after the three-way meeting. The U.S. is still open to talks with North Korea on the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. White House Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Monday that North Korea's recent missile launches don't shake Washington's willingness to attempt diplomacy with the regime. She said the Biden administration's offer still stands to meet North Korea anywhere, anytime, without strings attached. However, sanctions will remain in place. On Saturday and Sunday, North Korea launched long-range cruise missiles into the sea. In response to this, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said the action highlights the threat to neighboring countries and the international community. Following a report last month by the UN nuclear watchdog suggesting that North Korea has restarted nuclear activities, the head of the IAEA urged the country to comply with international obligations, calling the situation deeply troubling. Our Kim Sang-min reports.
International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi on Monday called on North Korea to fully comply with its international obligations to limit nuclear activities. He pointed to a report from the agency in late August that suggested a nuclear reactor remains in operation. In the report, there were indications of the operation of two North Korean nuclear facilities, the 5-megawatt nuclear reactor in Yongbyon and the site's radiochemical laboratory. According to the agency, the 5-megawatt reactor is widely believed to be at the center of North Korea's nuclear program, essential for producing plutonium for nuclear weapons. The Director General said the situation is deeply troubling to the IAEA and that North Korea's nuclear activities are causing serious concern. Urging North Korea to comply with its obligations under relevant UN Security Council resolutions, the agency assured that they remain ready to return to North Korea and play an essential role in verifying the nuclear program. The IAEA has had no access to North Korea since 2009 when the inspectors were expelled, and since then has been monitoring the country through satellite imagery. Kim Sang-min, Arirang News.
The foreign and defense ministers of South Korea and Australia on Monday stressed the need for diplomatic engagement with North Korea. Our foreign affairs correspondent Yoon Jae-min has more on what was discussed during their so-called 2+2 meeting.
Regarding North Korea's recent test firing of long-range cruise missiles, the foreign and defense ministers of South Korea and Australia stressed the importance of diplomatic engagement with the North. At a press conference after a 2+2 meeting in Seoul on Monday, South Korea's foreign minister said Korea is closely working with the U.S. in analyzing certain details, including the North's intentions.
North Korea is resuming its nuclear and missile activities, including its recent firing of cruise missiles after 6 months. This shows urgent need for dialogue, engagement and diplomacy to fundamentally resolve these issues.
While welcoming South Korea's commitment for engagement with the North, the Australian foreign minister stressed the need for continued sanctions on the regime.
That we remain committed to enforcing UN Security Council and our own autonomous sanctions in relation to the DPRK until clear steps are taken towards complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearisation.
When asked about the Australian Defence Minister accusing China of coercion and aggression for its behaviour in the region, Dutton said Australia wants peace in the region and to work with like-minded democracies.
As I say, our overarching priority and principle, which I think we share deeply with the ROK, is to make sure that we have that continued security in the Indo-Pacific. We have a respect for sovereignty, and our two countries share values and perspective that lend weight to that.
Regarding expansion of the US-led intel sharing program Five Eyes or the Quad initiative, the minister said the issues were not discussed at the 2+2 meeting.
There was no detailed discussion on the issues of Quad Plus or Five Eyes. Our government stands firm that we intend to cooperate with any global initiative that seeks openness, transparency, and inclusiveness.
Marking 60 years of diplomatic ties, the ministers signed a memorandum of understanding for cooperation in cyber core technology while creating a space policy dialogue. They also pledged to continue excavating and identifying the remains of the Australian veterans who participated in the Korean War. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden will host the very first face-to-face summit of leaders of the so-called Quad countries at the White House next week. Citing government sources, Reuters say that the meeting will be held on September 24th, involving the leaders of Australia, India, and Japan. The summit will follow the UN General Assembly slated to kick off next Tuesday in New York. The Quad has been seeking ways to bolster cooperation to counter China's growing assertiveness in the region. South Korea's top court on Monday upheld a lower court's ruling that Mitsubishi Heavy Industries needs to compensate South Korean wartime forced labor victims. The Japanese government reacted by saying the Supreme Court's ruling has the potential to cripple Seoul-Tokyo relations. Kim Yan-sing with the details.
The Japanese government on Monday warned of the relationship between South Korea and Japan souring in the future, as South Korea's Supreme Court backed the seizure of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries' Korea-based assets. This particular case dates back to 2018, when the South Korean top court first ordered the Japanese firm Mitsubishi to financially compensate South Korean victims they forced into backbreaking labor during World War II. The court ordered Mitsubishi to pay 100 to 150 million Korean won, or 85 to 128,000 US dollars, to each of the 5 victims involved in the suit. But Mitsubishi refused to pay. They said all restitution had already been paid in 1965 by a treaty signed by the two countries. So then, the victims and their surviving members took the case to Daejeon District Court, asking for the seizure of 6 Mitsubishi patents and 2 of their trademark rights in place of their compensation. The Daejeon court ruled in favor of the victims, but Mitsubishi once again rejected the court's decision and brought the case to the Supreme Court earlier this year. After several months of deliberation, finally on Monday, South Korea's Supreme Court rejected Mitsubishi's appeal. The top court said that the original ruling was reasonable and did not violate any part of the Constitution, laws, orders, or legislation. But the Japanese government wasted little time chiming in on the matter. Chief Cabinet Secretary Katsunobu Kato said Monday that South Korea's Supreme Court should come up with more proposable solutions, because otherwise, the ruling will sour Seoul-Tokyo relations even further. Kim Yan-sung, Arirang News.
Now turning to COVID-19, South Korea's daily caseload isn't getting much better despite the fact we're into the 10th week of current social distancing measures. Health officials are worried that the upcoming Chuseok holiday will only make things worse. For the latest, let's turn to our Kim Do-yeon at the Arirang News Center. Do-yeon, give us the details.
Mo-yeon, South Korea reported 1,497 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday, of which all but 34 were locally transmitted. It's up 64 cases from 24 hours before, but 100 lower than last week's number for the same day. However, Seoul City alone confirmed 529 cases, up 52 cases on week despite the fall in nationwide numbers. As you mentioned, this is concerning for the authorities as the Chuseok holiday is coming and a massive movement of people is expected, especially from Seoul to the rest of the nation. Take a listen to what Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum had to say this morning.
For the safety and health of your family, including your parents, we emphasize that you please minimize movement and gatherings. Please get vaccinated or tested for COVID-19 before, and if that's not possible, keep in mind that delaying visits would be the wisest option to protect your parents, family, and neighbors.
Now, Toyeon, it seems like you have been emphasizing the surge of cases in the capital region some time now, and we're just days away from a major holiday when a massive movement among citizens is expected. The southernmost island of Jeju is a popular tourist spot for Koreans, and I'm hearing there will be special virus prevention measures imposed there during the holidays.
That's right, Mogen. South Korea's southernmost island of Jeju, like you said, a popular resort region, is expected to see some 200,000 visitors starting Friday, many of them heading from the capital region. That said, the island's local authorities are requesting that people take a COVID-19 test before visiting. If a visitor comes and is found to be a carrier of COVID-19, they will be penalized for any negative consequences of their visit. In addition, additional manpower will be deployed at the airport to screen the temperatures of those arriving. Testing centers on the island will operate normal business hours during the holidays, and the medical response team will be available 24 hours a day throughout the period. South Korean health authorities say treating COVID-19 patients is the government's duty by law, and it'll pay for antiviral medications at an expected cost of around $765 a dose. The treatment is being seen as a game changer, with COVID-19 now expected to be around forever. South Korea is in talks with various manufacturers, and as of now, Merck & Company, Pfizer and Roche are the pharmaceutical companies in phase 3 of clinical trials. Merck & Company is leading the race and could even win emergency authorization use from the FDA for its drug as soon as this year. Health authorities here say they've allocated more than $30 million for this year and the next, enough to secure almost 40,000 doses. U.S. top infectious diseases expert Dr. Anthony Fauci says it may take, quote, many more vaccine mandates from schools and businesses in order to control the pandemic if people aren't persuaded by health officials and their politicians to get vaccinated. On Sunday, local time, he said in an interview with the Association of LGBTQ journalists that he believes the situation can be resolved as people will want a return to normalcy. And while it's better to inoculate people based on their choice, if needed, making shots mandatory will have to be done. This comes as 63% of the eligible population in the U.S. is fully vaccinated. He added that the country is currently in a very difficult period due to the Delta variant.
A month after the Taliban took the reins of power in Afghanistan following the rapid withdrawal of U.S. military, the UN has raised hundreds of millions of dollars in emergency funds from donor countries. It says the massive cash injection will be used to help Afghan civilians who face the potential of widespread hunger. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
The international community has pledged to donate over $1 billion to Afghanistan as it faces a major humanitarian crisis after the Taliban took over the country last month. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres made the plea for global support at a conference held Monday in Geneva to the various governments and aid organizations in attendance.
I urge you to support our flash appeal for $606 million to get urgent assistance to 11 million people in the next 4 months. Today, we are announcing a $20 million allocation from the UN Central Emergency Response Fund to support the humanitarian operation in Afghanistan.
There are mounting concerns over worsening instability across the country, compounded by an ongoing drought, which could further put at risk the lives of Afghans and plunge the country toward famine. The U.S. has vowed $64 million in new humanitarian assistance, while Germany also said it will ramp up funding for the country. The major beneficiary of the funds, which the UN said could bring, quote, vital relief to millions of people, will be the UN's World Food Program. The UN also expressed deep concern about Afghanistan's refugee issue, urging countries to embrace them going forward.
Of course, should new flows unfortunately occur, I will appeal to all countries to exercise generous hospitality for people seeking asylum. But irrespective of population flows, of new flows, it is important to give help to existing refugees.
Meanwhile, the UN human rights chief warned of a, quote, new and perilous phase for Afghanistan, pointing out that there is a major disconnection between the Taliban's words and actions.
Importantly, and in contradiction to assurances that the Taliban would uphold women's rights over the past 3 weeks, women have instead been progressively excluded from the public sphere. In many areas, they are prohibited from appearing in public spaces without a male chaperone.
She also added that her office has collected information that shows that Taliban forces have been conducting house-to-house searches for specific officials who worked for the previous government and those who have cooperated with U.S. forces. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken defended the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan while addressing the House Foreign Affairs Committee on Monday, explaining that no one predicted the Afghan army would collapse completely at the hands of the militant group. He also acknowledged that the new interim government formed by the Taliban has fallen short of international expectations, as it is far from underscoring inclusivity, which was demanded by the global community. Kim Hye-san, Arirang News.
South Korea's export and import prices edged up in August. The Bank of Korea says the export price index increased 1% from July to almost 113. This was the 9th straight month of gains, although the speed of the increase slowed from the previous month. The increase in export prices was driven by higher prices of industrial products like chemical products. Import prices rose 0.6% on month, mainly on higher intermediate goods prices, including primary metal products. BTS and Coldplay will release a new single called My Universe in the coming days. The collaboration between the Korean and British stars, which will be released on September 24th, will also feature on Coldplay's forthcoming album, Music of the Spears. The song, written by both bands, is sung in Korean and English. This collaboration comes after BTS and Coldplay's lead singer Chris Martin recently appeared together on a special episode of the YouTube original series released. The founder of Yoido Full Gospel Church in Seoul died on Tuesday at the age of 85. Reverend Cho Yong-gil had been receiving medical treatment since suffering a brain hemorrhage last year. Founded in 1958, the Yoido Full Gospel Church started off with only 5 people present. It has grown to become the largest single church congregation in the world, with some 830,000 registered members.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. We start things off in Egypt, where Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett met Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Monday for talks on relations between the two countries, marking the first official trip by an Israeli head of government to Egypt in a decade. Ahead of his return to Israel, Prime Minister Bennett spoke to reporters at the airport, noting the importance of dialogue between the two sides.
We discussed a number of issues in the fields of diplomacy, security, economy, and ways to deepen the connection and strengthen the interests of our countries. Israel is opening up to the countries of the region, and the peace between Israel and Egypt is the basis for this years-long recognition. This is why we must invest in strengthening this relationship on both sides, as we did today.
According to a statement from the president's office, President al-Sisi cited Egypt's efforts to maintain calm in Palestinian territories and the importance of international support for rebuilding efforts in the region. It added that al-Sisi affirmed his government's support for all efforts to achieve comprehensive peace in the Middle East. The state visit comes as Bennett, who took office in June, was invited by al-Sisi last month. Egypt became the first Arab country to sign a peace treaty with Israel in 1979. History will be made later this week as yet another billionaire entrepreneur is set to ride into space. While Elon Musk himself won't be on the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, Jared Isaacman, the founder and chief executive of e-commerce firm Shift4Payment, will lead 3 fellow spaceflight novices, making history as the first all-civilian crew to be launched into Earth's orbit. The spacecraft is set for blastoff from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida, with a 24-hour target launch window that begins on Wednesday. That window could be narrowed or delayed a few days depending on the weather. While it's unknown how much the 38-year-old tech mogul gave to Musk to fly himself along with his 3 other travel companions, a successful mission would help usher in a new era of commercial space tourism, with companies vying for wealthy customers willing to pay a small fortune to experience a once-in-a-lifetime trip. And finally, pop superstar Britney Spears, who's been embattled in a conservatorship that governs her personal life and finances with her father, announced she's engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Sam Asghari. The announcement comes as Spears posted a video of herself standing next to her new fiancé on Sunday, showing off her new shiny engagement ring. The 39-year-old has been married twice before, first to her childhood friend Jason Alexander in 2004, which was annulled a few days later, and then to dancer Kevin Federline later that year. That marriage ended in divorce in 2007. The Iranian-born Asghari is a personal trainer and actor and is 12 years younger than Spears. The two began dating back in 2016. 이승재, Arirang News.
Good morning. Southern regions have been feeling the impact of Typhoon Chantu that's near waters of Shanghai and will actually remain stagnant there through Thursday before approaching waters of Jeju Island by Friday morning. Then it should pass Korea's south coast. So Jeju has been hit with strong winds and could see 50 to 70 millimeters of rain an hour. And rain and wind will only pick up as the day goes on today. So up to 300 millimeters of rain is in the forecast on Jeju Island. Jeollanam-do province could see 120 millimeters of downpours. A heavy rain and strong wind watch is also in place on Jeju. And waters of the southern coast of Jeju Island are under a typhoon warning, and weather alerts will be expanded as the condition will get rougher as the day goes on today. Meanwhile, it looks to be a calm and hot day in the upper regions under mostly sunny skies with an expected high of 31 degrees Celsius here in the capital. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that will do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back at noon Korea time, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching and goodbye.